It is Friday before the big Saturday showdown. Steelers, Ravens for a third time in the wild card round. We're going to break things down. Offense, defense. We go into the locker room, talk to Cam Heyward, talk about Russell Wilson, what they need to do on defense. Lots to break down in this game. I'm Chris Carter. This is the Locked On Steelers podcast.
Chris, hold up.
Mike?
I got you, Chris. I got
Mike?
you.
Wait a second. Where's Mike DeFabo? Mike DeFabo's here. What's up?
It's time to let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Go to Prize Picks today. We're joined by Mike DeFabo, who stole my let's get into it today, but I'm all for it because I love the playoff energy.
Chris, it's my favorite thing about the show. And we made a deal. I said, I'm only doing this podcast if I get to say, let's get into it. I've always wanted to say it.
Well, now you're official on the show. Let it be known that Mike's brother included "Let's Get Into It" in his wedding speech at the reception. It was amazing.
There were about 4 or 5 people who got it, but the people who got it really, really enjoyed it. And while we're talking about my brother, please, Chris, we got to give him a shout out. You had what's it called, the Pigskin Pick'em.
Pigskin Pick'em. He finished seventh place.
You can look up the rankings. Mike's brother's picks finished 7th overall. He beat me, actually. I think he beat you, Chris. I think he beat Jenna.
Me.
So
beat all of us.
Maybe we should be taking our advice from somebody else.
Maybe we should. Maybe your brother needs to come on this show. We need him to be a guest to break things down. I didn't even see Mike's brother's picks all year. I am ashamed of myself for not noticing that. But let's get into the Steelers today, Mike. You and I were both in the locker room. We were watching them outdoor practices at Acrisure Stadium this week, getting used to the cold, used to the environment, and everything there because it's supposed to get nasty in Baltimore for this game. But one thing that seems to be across the board, Mike, is this team. They acknowledge that, hey, we've had the right schemes, we've had the right calls. We need to execute. We need to follow through. It's now or never. And I think that sense of urgency is being displayed across the board in the Steelers in the sense hey, it's not about doing something brand new. It's not about stepping way outside of our skill set. It's about doing what we know we can do. And if the Steelers do that, they can find their confidence again and play good football again, which they haven't in about over a month.
Yeah, I think it should give this team a level of optimism that they have had Lamar Jackson and the Ravens numbered. Earlier this year, they made the Ravens top flight offense look pretty bad. And they were one of the only teams that's been able to shut them down. So, I asked TJ Watt, I said, look, after what you guys have gone through over the last month and what you've gone through over the last several postseasons, what gives you confidence you can do it? And he was like, look, we are a pretty damn good football team. And we've got the scheme, we've got the coaches, we've got the players. So now it's about putting it together. And really, this is the moment that matters for them. And I think one of the biggest things, if you're looking for optimism and you're a Steelers fan, they get back a lot of the key guys that weren't there the last time. Deshaun Elliott is a significant factor in the run game. Larry Ogunjobi is a significant factor. George Pickens didn't play at that game. So now a team that's at full strength will have to be at its best against their, arguably their biggest test of the season.
Absolutely. And, again, to your point, the Steelers, when they beat them the first time, they allowed only 16 points. That's the fewest amount of points scored by the Ravens this season. They have the formula. And again, that wasn't a one-off. That was the 8th time they had beaten them in the last 9 matchups before this last one, and now it's 8-10. They have the formula to do this. They have the personnel. And to your point, in that last game, they started off the game missing half their secondary with Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson gone. And Joey Porter Jr. left mid-game. And Joey Porter Jr. in the first game shut out Zay Flowers. That's going to be a big thing. Now Zay Flowers out for this game. big factors there. I really think we're going to get into some man coverage stuff real quick, but I wanted to also throw it to Cam Heyward, who was in the locker room talking to us today about things the Steelers need to do. We know that the Steelers know about Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and one of the things I thought that hurt the Steelers a little bit was the option from between those two that kind of forced the Steelers to kind of hesitate. The Steelers can't afford to hesitate. They have to be aggressive. They have to attack. Here was Cam Heyward talking about how they need to do that better and how things could be different this time around in the playoffs.
The Ravens been using the option to set up a lot of their plays, just hit between Lamar and Derrick. What do you guys have to do better to limit that and keep it in control so that you guys control the pace?
Got to get off blocks, stay in our gaps. I think just execute. I think before we go on and try to play hero ball, take care of your job and just settle in with our technique and fundamentals.
Cam, is that what separated the first game from the second?
I think so. There's instances where we were out of gap. Our defense thrives when we take care of our jobs.
How does Elliott being back help that? How does Deshaun being back for this matchup help that?
I think just having a guy who comes downhill, I think he understands his defense a lot more, and we feel comfortable with him. And so having everybody back is huge. So hopefully he plays a good part in winning this game.
So there you have it. Cam Heyward talking about the different things they got to do right in this game and how they can get things back. But again, Mike, I think he's talked about it. TJ Watt talked about it. It's not about trying to learn some whole new scheme. It's about playing the scheme, playing the plays, playing the roles that they have developed all season, and through most of it had played it very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I have some intel from the Mike DeFabo Stats and Information Department for you along these lines. Now, look, if the Steelers can slow down, you're not going to stop Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson on the ground, but if you could slow them down, Lamar Jackson has really struggled as a passer against the Steelers. Here's a stat for you, Chris. Against teams he's played more than twice in his career, Lamar Jackson has his lowest completion percentage, lowest quarterback rating, most interceptions, and second most sacks versus the Steelers. So, if the issue in that most recent game was they could not stop Derrick Henry. They could not stop Lamar Jackson running. If you can keep him in the pocket, make him beat you as a passer, I'm not saying you're going to win the game, but that's your formula that you have to use if you want any hope.
I agree. And one thing that you and I talked about off air, I wrote about this for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in my film review, is the use of man coverage is going to be so vital in this game. Without Dante Jackson, it was a challenge. Without Deshaun Elliott, it was a challenge. Then without Joey Porter Jr., it was almost impossible to run man coverage successfully against Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. They were getting torched when they called man. But when Joey Porter Jr. locks in, he's been a very good man defender this year. And in fact, I went through it among players who have been targeted at least 30 times when in man coverage this year. He has the fourth best yards per a target allowed, right behind guys like Pat Surtain, Derek Stingley. So he's right up there as far as man coverage guys. And numbers wise, you were telling me before the show, there's numbers that support that the Steelers can do well against Lamar Jackson while in man coverage, while some people think zone's how you got to play a mobile quarterback because you want to be facing the quarterback. It's been kind of the other way around.
Right. So as you're alluding to, there is a risk when you're playing a mobile quarterback when you're in man coverage, because the whole philosophy is if they send guys deep, you've got backs to a mobile quarterback. He could see that, take off running, whereas zone, you've got eyes on the quarterback. So there is a little give and take here. But if you dig into the numbers, against zone coverage, Lamar Jackson completes nearly 72% of his passes. Against man, that drops to 60%. If you look at his passer rating zone, it's 120.8, which is just ridiculous. He's done that all season.
Yeah.
It drops to about 105 is his passer rating against man. You look at EPA per dropback, and he's about 0.4 against zone. That drops all the way down to 0.08 against man. So I think the key for the Steelers is the risk in playing man coverage against him, but disguising, picking your spots, especially down by the goal line where there's less of a chance for him, to take off and make a big gain because you're already in a condensed situation, or just kind of throwing them off and changing some of your tendencies. But mixing that in is definitely, I think, going to have to be a part of the game plan, as you're alluding to, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's really going to be about mixing that up and trying to confuse him. And that's the other part of it is you're trying to confuse the quarterback. Like I said this on 93.7 The Fan the other night when Jason Mackey had me on, but like great defenses don't take away everything all the time. They confuse you because you can't take away everything all the time. No defense can do that in any sport. Like, for example, Duke basketball, when they beat up on Pitt the other night when I was covering them, one thing that Duke did was they didn't take away every shot. In fact, Pitt had several open shots, but they forced Pitt to have to hit them from spots they're not used to. And so they missed some open shots, and that took Pitt out of its rhythm, and they weren't able to get into the high-scoring offense that Pitt likes to do. The same thing is what the Steelers do to the Ravens. They don't take away every receiver all the time. There's guys that are going to be open naturally. You can't cover everyone all the time. But what they do is they try to force it that, hey, if a guy's getting open, he's getting open in a spot that Lamar is going to have to take some time to go see. And that pressure is coming. It's going to put him in a clock where he has to make a tight decision. And you know what? If Lamar Jackson makes a great play, good for him. But your job as the defense is to make it harder for him to be comfortable in finding that. And that's what the Steelers have been really good at doing against Lamar Jackson throughout their career. I was encouraged if I'm looking at the Steelers and I'm trying to see, are they going to bounce back? I was encouraged by the way they played the Bengals passing offense. They limited them to a single touchdown in that game. If they can replicate that and the defensive front get back to being nasty against the Ravens, I thought they got bullied a little bit in the second game. That's going to be key. And that's, again, why I think the man coverage and trusting this secondary to win on islands is going to be so huge in this game, because if the defensive front can say, you know what, Joey Porter, Minka, Deshaun, Dante, they got it. We don't got to worry about Bateman and whoever else and Mark Andrews. We are here to crush this line and crush Derrick Henry and crush Lamar Jackson. That's the approach that they need to have on defense.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of dive into one of your points there, with Deshaun Elliott being back, we talked about how he's going to be an impact player in the run game. But I also think there's going to be a number of instances where he's going to be matched up against Mark Andrews. And we know that tight ends for years have been a bit of a challenge for the Steelers. And so, and they obviously were a big challenge for the Steelers in the most recent game with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews both scoring a touchdown. So slowing down those tight ends is going to be a big point of emphasis. And I think that in addition to what he's doing in the run game, Deshaun Elliott can help be a factor in that part of the game plan as well.
Absolutely. We are not passing up on the offense. We are going to talk about Russell Wilson, the offense, and what they have to do in this game. But we also got to get our picks in for Wild Card Weekend, baby. We're going to get all our picks in here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you that this show is also brought to you by TurboTax. Are you tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. Taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, not taxes into the sunset. Whether you've got 1 or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today to get matched with your expert who's ready to take the taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at turbotax.com/guarantees. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. If you love watching the game, you love the playoffs, there's no better place to enjoy them by playing Prize Picks, where, again, all you have to do is just pick more or less on a player's stat projections like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and you have a shot to win 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. There's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today, Prize Picks, and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Go to Prize Picks today. Go to prizepicks.com or download the Prize Picks app. Use Locked On NFL as the code. You'll get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 alignment. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, as we said, your brother finished in 7th place in the Locked On Pick'em League. But we got to shout out the champion who picked 206 games correctly this season. Ooh. No one got 200. Matt Beeb's picks. Granted, I see about 2 Matt Beebs in the top 10, so I see you went with 2 different things, sir. But congratulations, he is the winner of the Locked On Steelers Pick'em League.
What does he win? What's he get?
This shout out, Matt Beeb. Congratulations.
Just street cred and clout.
Yeah, basically that's what you get. You can walk around saying, I whoop Chris Carter and Jenna Horner and Mike DeFabo.
That's
and
what
Mike
he's going to say. Every bar he goes to in Pittsburgh, I whoop these guys.
But in all seriousness, we do appreciate you. There were 406 of you that played with us. And guess what? You can keep playing with us. While the Pick'em League is done, there is now the Pick'em Bracket Challenge, or the Pigskin Bracket Challenge, where you can pick all your NFL teams throughout the playoffs. I have posted it on my Twitter, on my X account, and on my Blue Sky account for a link to join. Just go there and you can join and play with us, just like you did this. But be sure to do this before the Steelers game or before the Texans Chargers game that kicks off, I think 4:30 on Saturday, because then brackets will lock in. So sorry for the quick turnaround, but you basically have all Friday and then Saturday morning to get in and join us. Be sure to join us there. So, Mike, without any further ado, let's talk about these playoffs. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. There you go. You get it. Yeah, 2 in the same show. Look at you. Let's start with that first AFC game. Of course, we saved Steelers Ravens for last, but Chargers at Texans. The Chargers are only 2.5-point favorites. And Mike, I feel like that is too small a spread for how well the Chargers played to get into the playoffs and how poorly the Texans played. As bad as the Steelers have been, the Texans have been rough. And I felt like if the Steelers had won that last game, this would have been the warm-up game. The Steelers could go into this game. They still need to play their best and win because they're playing a division winner on the road. But this would have been, I think, much less steep of a hill to climb than what they're currently going through against the Ravens. And because of that, I'm taking the Chargers.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for me, the matchup, it's disappointing for the Steelers that they didn't get this matchup because they did match up well. And specifically, the Texans have struggled to protect C.J. Stroud this season. And I felt like the Steelers pass rush would have gotten to him. The Chargers are very much a defensive-minded team. They've been top 5 in defense virtually throughout the entire season. They also run the ball a ton and keep it away from their opponent. So I think in that style of game, I have to side with you, Chris. I also agree. I would go with the Chargers in this one.
Yeah, I feel like that's a gimme there. Now, the Chargers winning that game would make it interesting if the Steelers were able to win their game. They wouldn't be locked into going to the Chiefs unless if the Broncos were able to somehow upset the Bills. The Steelers could then host the Chargers in that situation. But again, we got to get to that point. But let's keep it moving here with the other picks here in the playoffs. The AFC finishes out their games. Broncos at Bills, 1 p.m. Sunday. The Bills are 8.5-point favorites in this game, according to FanDuel Sportsbook. Mike, I like the Bills. I'm going to pick the Bills, but there is something tricky about this Broncos team that I think could maybe trip the Bills up if they come out and they're not on fire with Josh Allen right away.
Well, hold on a minute. I should have clarified this. Are we doing against the spread or are we doing straight up picks?
You're doing straight up picks here. We don't straight up against the spread.
Okay. Yeah. I think I've watched too many games of late of the Bills just blowing the doors off of opponents, including in the playoffs last year against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was a team that was supposed to take a step back after they lost Stephon Diggs, but they're clicking on all cylinders. There's a reason why Josh Allen is in that MVP conversation. And maybe this is the year that a somewhat cursed franchise finally gets their Super Bowl or at least goes to one. I definitely like the Bills in this one. It's going to be a little bit tougher than people think. The Denver Broncos are another team with a very good pass rush, very good defense. That's been their calling card. Bo Nix has improved. I think they're a much better team than the one that the Steelers beat early in the season, but still got to go with Josh Allen and the Bills.
Yeah, I'm right with you there. I think that the Broncos deserve a lot of commendations. I thought they were going to be like a top 10 pick team this year. They found their way into the playoffs. Kudos to Sean Payton and then those guys for what they did to step up this year. Let's switch to the NFC game, which I find all of them to be particularly interesting. The first of which, 4:30 p.m. Sunday. Packers at Eagles. The Eagles are 4.5-point favorites. It looks like Jalen Hurts is practicing in a limited capacity, but he's still in the concussion protocol. So that's that's maybe a good sign that he could be there. But AJ Brown is now on the injury report as well. And I think there's some concerns there. And listen, Mike, I think the Eagles for most of the season have been one of the best teams in the NFL. I think they've been dangerous. They win the trenches. But give me the Packers right now. I go with an upset pick here because I'm not so sure if Jalen Hurts is fully healthy. I'm not so sure AJ Brown's fully healthy. And if they have to go with Tanner McKee at quarterback, I think that this Packers team can find a way to win. I like Jordan Love. This Packers defense, I think, is underrated and underappreciated. I think they pull off an upset, and they're the 7th seed moving on.
I like the bold take there, Chris. And I'll back you up a bit in the sense that I just looked it up. Green Bay's defense is allowing the 3rd fewest yards per carry at 4.0. So, that's going to be the game plan. That was the game plan for the Steelers, is slow down Saquon Barkley, slow down Jalen Hurts on the read option. I don't think they're going to be able to completely shut down that Eagles team, though. I just feel like of the true contenders and of the teams the Steelers have faced, they looked like the most complete. And you go through so many different metrics, so many different stats. They're near the top of the league in so many different things, whether that be their pass defense, whether that be their rushing attack. So I just feel like they have a lot of different ways to beat you. And if Jalen Hurts comes back, which is, I guess, a big if, or it's still uncertain at this point, I like the Eagles to move on to that next round.
Look, if I find out that Jalen Hurts is playing, then I am switching. I'm going right. Oh, Eagles definitely going to win it because the Eagles were going to be my NFC Championship game against the Lions pick because those two teams have been playing very well. But so count my Packers pick dependent on Jalen Hurts' injury status. Let's move along to the other NFC games here. This one's a very interesting one. The Commanders at the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are 3-point favorites at home. They won the NFC South. Jaden Daniels and Baker Mayfield. I think this could be a really exciting matchup between these two teams. These offenses that got playmakers, quarterbacks that are playmakers. But give me the Commanders. I like the way that they've played throughout this season. I think the Buccaneers deserve a ton of credit for how they've won a lot of their games, how they got into the playoffs. But I'm looking at this Commanders team. They won 5 straight to finish out the season, and their offense has looked really sharp in those 5 games. They scored 30 or more points 3 times. I think that this is a young Jaden Daniels team that's got a lot to prove, and they're going to prove some in beating the Buccaneers. What say you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, Chris. And I give Baker Mayfield a lot of credit. I've really enjoyed to see his redemption story, the way that he's proved himself as his career has gone on after the Browns gave up on him. And he is a fighter, and I always, I think he's a good gambling pick to cover, but I don't always like him to win the games. And I look at the most recent performance, like the Buccaneers essentially were in a playoff game last weekend. They just had to beat the miserable Saints, and they would get in. And yet it was such a struggle for them. And it came down to the last minute. They had everything in the world to play for. The Saints had very, very little, if nothing, to play for, and they still could barely get it done. So, their performance in what was essentially an elimination game really deters me from picking them. I'm with you, Chris. I think that the Commanders win this one.
All right. This one, I think one of the more intriguing matchups as well. Vikings at Rams. The Vikings are 1.5-point favorites. The Vikings have done so many things right this year. They almost were the 1 seed as they matched up with the Lions last week in the season finale. They were 14-3. It is tough to be a 14-3 5 seed in the playoffs, but hey, that's what happens when you have a 15-2 team at the top of your division. And people might think, oh, well, they're going to steamroll the 10-7 Rams. I'm going the other way, though, Mike. I think this Rams team is a dark horse. Their defense has gotten nastier throughout the year. They figured out their offense. Puka Nacua has been a threat. Matt Stafford's back and throwing. I think the Rams are a dark horse, and they're going to upset the Minnesota Vikings. At home they're going to do it, but I think that the Rams are going to find a way to pull it off and keep marching into the playoffs. What say you?
Well, Chris, in my own pick'em that I do against my cousin and a bunch of his buddies, The Rams, that's the team that I got most wrong. I could not figure them out. I would be on the Rams bandwagon when they played first week of the season, when they played the Lions to overtime. I was like, man, this Rams team, they might have something to them. Then they dropped a couple games. I got off the bandwagon. Then they started heating up, and I just never could be on the same page as them. But that said, I have to go with the Vikings in this one. I love what Brian Flores has done defensively, all the different looks and pressures that he throws at you. And even though the Rams offense has improved, they still are 22nd in scoring on the season. So, you think of Sean McVay as this offensive innovator, this genius, this great offensive mind, but his offenses have really been inconsistent. And I think that in a matchup, a great, coaching X's and O's matchup between Flores versus McVay, I like Flores in this one to win.
Certainly going to be interesting. We'll see how those matchups play up. But now we got to get back to Steelers Ravens, the big matchup of the weekend. We'll get to that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You heard all those odds, ends, and lines. Guess what? All of them came from FanDuel Sportsbook because they are the #1 sportsbook in America. And new customers right now can bet $5 on FanDuel Sportsbook and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed back. That's right. You get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, when you place your first bet of $5 or more. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. In fact, here are the odds, ends, and lines for Steelers-Ravens. The Steelers are still 9.5-point road underdogs against the Ravens, where the Ravens' money line has now moved back a little bit to -550. The Steelers' money line moved back to +410, slightly tilting back into the Steelers a little bit there. The over-under is still set at 43.5 points. Where will you put your money this weekend? Be sure to do so with FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. When you go to FanDuel.com, you can get your chance to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first bet of $5 or more. Be sure to capitalize on $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. Only on FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in America. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, we talked a lot about the defense in that first segment. We got to talk about the offense. The Steelers offense hasn't scored 20 points in 4 straight games. It's been in a rut. It's been in a tough spot. And I look at this game. I actually like the defensive matchup for the Steelers in this game. I think the Steelers defense can run with the Ravens as they are, especially with Zay Flowers out, especially with their secondary finally healthy again. I think that this can be a game the Steelers defense shows up. What I don't know is if this offense can show up, Mike. They haven't shown up for the better part of a month. Russell Wilson has been a shell of what he was for 2 months in this past 4-game stretch. The run game, they've tried to get it going. It hasn't been there consistently. It has spurts here and there. And they haven't really, and George Pickens, since he's been back from his injury, really hasn't gone off for the Steelers. And in fact, had his worst game of the season last week when he had 3 drops here. What's the biggest thing in your mind that has to happen for this Steelers offense to finally get back to at least being solid for a unit?
It's got to be the moon ball. I think that the best thing that Russell Wilson did was he realized I have George Pickens. And if I can get the ball to George Pickens, that is an absolute game changer. Mike Tomlin likes to talk about how explosive plays make up for a lot of execution. Like, you don't have to execute it. You could just, boom, there it is, that play. And it was a really nice marriage between Russell Wilson, who throughout his career has been one of the best deep ball throwers in the entire league in a number of different stats, with George Pickens, one of the best deep ball catchers. And, you look at the first 7 games, Russell Wilson was on passes that travel 20 plus yards in the air. He was completing more than 50% of those.
Wild.
Now, over the 4-game skid, 2 of those games without George Pickens, it's more like 33%. So We heard you referenced this, Chris, in the locker room in a question to Najee Harris. I'm not sure if you have that clip queued up or not, but there was a defensive analyst from the Ravens on Hard Knocks, and he was talking about Russell Wilson can be a little bit like that basketball team that's all three-pointers and layups. If you take away his three-pointers, he can become a bit of a check-down Charlie. So for the Steelers, they know the Ravens, their main objective is we have to shut down these deep shots. They're probably going to be in a lot of too high looks. They're going to probably be sending a lot of coverage George Pickens' direction. That said, that can't deter you from at least trying to find a way to dial up those deep shots. And so for me, that's one of the biggest keys to the game.
I think so too. I did not key up that answer, that response, because Najee was kind of just like, they did what? Who said? I don't watch Hard Knocks, and so I was kind of
right.
But I did key up this because I think a big part of why the Steelers brought Russell Wilson in wasn't just for the moon ball, wasn't just for stats. It was because he was supposed to be a leader that guided this offense through its toughest moments. And for the first 2 months, he was that leader. For the last month, he hasn't done enough to pull them out of the gutter. And I asked a couple players, including Cam Heyward and Najee Harris, about this. Here's how they responded when I asked them about Russell Wilson.
Hard Knocks showed a clip of Russell talking to you after the game, talking about we need to focus to win 4. How have you seen his energy and leadership throughout you guys' highs and lows this season?
This season, I think Russ has just been consistent. He's a positive contributor. I think. When you look at what Russ came in to do, and he wants to be a leader on this team, he stayed true to that. And so, I think we're just trying to put our best foot forward and move on from the last game.
What's Russell Wilson's energy been like this week? As far as trying to be a leader and a veteran who's been in this situation a lot in his career.
It's good, man, to have somebody at that position to win playoff games and make it all the way through and win one. So it gives a good insight, but all that matters is what we do Saturday.
And right there at the end, all that matters is what we do Saturday. That needs to be the Steelers, whole theme is that, like, look, all this other talk aside, playoff Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson's been a Super Bowl champ, all that, it doesn't matter. You got to get it done. And to me, Mike, one thing Russell Wilson has to do in this game, especially if he wants to be the Steelers quarterback of the future, which I think he might have played himself out of being a sure thing and doing that in the last month. If he wants to get that back in these playoffs, he has to do the thing that the Ravens aren't expecting him to do and work the intermediate part of the field. It doesn't have to be the middle part of the field. It can even be, a 10-yard out. It can be hitting those spots there, but he has to hit them in the places that they're not. And if they're coming out, taking away the three-pointer and waiting for the checkdowns, they're going to be leaving those things open. He has to hit those seam balls, anything that's 8 to 15 yards downfield. You do that enough, especially early in the game, you can put a defense on their heels and force them to rethink, and then you're dictating the pace of play.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And hand in hand with that is, you played these clips about his leadership and his experience. And that, I think, is another huge factor that what he brings. And you see that's not just some intangible. There's a tangible element to that. When he comes to the line of scrimmage, either doesn't like what he sees or he sees something he can exploit, it changes the play. And I felt like we saw a lot more of that earlier on when he first was, when they made the transition from Justin Fields to Russ. And so I think that I would love to see Russ do some more of that in this game in terms of changing things, getting them into the right play, making little subtle adjustments at the line of scrimmage to make sure that your look is better than what they're showing you.
I'd also like to see Justin Fields worked in a little bit more now that he's healthy and they've had him for at least a week healthy. I'm not saying all game long, but I'm saying throw some packages in when you get those 3rd and shorts, when you get those, when you get in the red zone, make the Ravens have to think about something else. I think that could be another asset to them here. But Mike, let's get to our picks here. Give us your X factor, your thing that changes the game in the favor, how this game plays out, and what's your final score prediction for how this game will go?
I think the thing that changes the game is Derrick Henry. And the Steelers, when they've been really successful against the Ravens, they've been able to keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket. They've been able to contain the rushing attack of the Ravens, and they've forced Lamar to beat them from the pocket. But with Derrick Henry, that's a much different kind of challenge for them.
Yeah.
And For that reason, I'm sorry. I know this is a Steelers podcast, but I've got to go with the Ravens in this one. I think the Steelers can cover what is a very big spread. I think that this is going to be another one of those AFC North rough and tumble type of football games, lower scoring than you would anticipate, much closer than what the betting odds are going to be. But I think that this Ravens team is pretty complete. And I think after Lamar Jackson got the monkey off of his back last time they played Pittsburgh, I think he's going to do it again against the Steelers and end their season.
I think the Steelers defense is ready for the Derrick Henry Lamar Jackson challenge. I think that they can come out. I think they can hit better at the line of scrimmage. I noted in my film study after that game, it was uncharacteristic how the Steelers' interior defensive line got pushed back so much in that game. It muddied up the linebackers. It kept them from getting downhill and stopping Derrick Henry. I think they can mitigate Derrick Henry. I think they can mitigate the Lamar Jackson passing game. And I think this can be the rock fight the Steelers need it to be, because the last game, we had Nick Farabaugh on before the last game, and he said it needs to be the rock fight. If the Ravens score 30 points, it's over. They scored 30 points, it was over. But I think the Steelers, they can force it to be that rock fight in this game. What I'm not sure about is if the offense can do enough this time around to win the rock fight. And I think that the Ravens are kind of due to win one of those in this matchup, in this back and forth. And I think that what you're going to see is these two teams coming out slugfest, old school AFC North football, turnovers on both sides, kind of punch the way. And I think the Steelers even get a touchdown late that put them up 16-14 with a little bit of time left in the game. But I think you're going to see one thing we talked with Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens about Justin Tucker, who missed field goals in the last game that could have sunk the Steelers. He seems to have fixed his problems, and he's playing a lot better of late. I think that the Ravens find a way to drive down the field, get just enough in his field goal range, hit a game-winning field goal, and the Ravens win 17-16, a score the Steelers have beat them by several times over the past 5 years. But I think it flips the other way against the Steelers. Hey, it's the Locked On Steelers podcast, but that does not mean that we just lie about what we think is going to happen here. And listen, I'd love to keep covering playoff football. I'm not saying I want the Steelers to lose, but there's a reason why in the preseason I picked the Ravens as my AFC favorites. And in fact, I'll spoil my bracket here. I kept it. Ravens Lions are my Super Bowl. I've had that all season long. It's still my picks right now. I think this Ravens team is special. I think the Steelers team could have the things to trip them up. And I'll say this: I would not be shocked if the Steelers pulled off this upset. This is not the insurmountable hill that the Bills were without TJ Watt last year, or the Chiefs were back in 2021, where it took like miracle after miracle to make this. I could see this much more in the wheelhouse of the Steelers, but this is a red-hot Ravens team at home. The Steelers are ice cold. They've been struggling for a month now. It'd be an impeccable story of a turnaround if the Steelers found a way to win this game, and it'd be awesome to do that. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. And that's the thing, too, is the Steelers are kind of limping into the postseason. You could poke holes in a lot of what's going on with this team right now. I do think that they're going to rally, and I do think that they have a better chance because weird things happen in the AFC North, things that don't make any sense. Here's something to consider. The Cleveland Browns won 3 games all year, and 2 of those were against both of these AFC North playoff teams. So weird things happen in the AFC North. Maybe the Steelers can get some little luck. Maybe they can make the splash plays that are so necessary. Maybe they can pull off the upset. But unfortunately, I have to be with you, Chris. And if I'm picking and I'm projecting, I think that the Ravens are going to come out on top.
I don't think I've heard one analyst or reporter say the Steelers are going to win yet. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe that needs to be a thing, and maybe the Steelers can pull it out. But either way, you can get all your reactions to that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be home. I won't be in Baltimore. I have to cover Pitt Louisville, the basketball game at the Peterson Event Center earlier in the day, but I will be here. There will be a post-game show here, win or lose, with what the Steelers happen. Mike, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. You're always appreciated. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Mike DeFabo, also on the Blue Sky thing. And check out all of my work on The Athletic.
Absolutely. He's Mike DeFabo. We always thank Mike for coming on the show. I'm Chris Carter. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias. Same handle, @Carter Critiques. You can read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, including my film study on the Steelers' man coverage against the Ravens and how it could be an asset to them. And you can find me here every Monday through Friday, right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes. We're back Saturday night recapping what could be the last game of the season for the Steelers or a major upset over the Ravens that send them into the next round of the playoffs. Find out here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.